Chapter 19, 26.2 miles. I tried really hard to focus in on my newest goal. I was running 3 days a week on my own. Until now, running was important, but I hadn't taken the individual runs seriously. On Monday, I went to the mall and bought a running watch. Nothing too fancy, just something that would allow me to set a pace and stick to it, or even exceed it. I started timing my runs and writing the times down in my journal. By Thursday's run, I had reduced my time by 15 minutes. I was going to take whatever action necessary to finish the marathon in less than 5 hours. 3 Thursdays later, Gary and Malcolm and I loaded up Malcolm's van and started the 800-mile trip from Oklahoma City to Chicago. Just like Malcolm's car, the van was used but immaculate. I had plenty of room to myself. We talked the whole way to Chicago. The van had a TV and a great stereo, but most of the time they were off. We talked about making money, family, marathons, traveling, and religion. More than once, Malcolm reminded Gary to follow the plan that they had created for his business to grow. It doesn't happen by accident, Gary. You won't just wake up one day with a multi-million-dollar business. You stick to the plan we made and watch your business grow. I had to ask, Gary, is it really your plan to have a multi-million-dollar business? Yes, Malcolm and I have been working on that since I got released. I couldn't believe Gary had set such a high goal for himself. Even more impressive, though, was the fact that Gary was on his way. I could see Gary's business growing and that he was on his way to having his home paid for. I had no doubt that Gary would make this happen. Tony, Gary isn't doing anything that you can't do. With the right knowledge and action, you can grow your business as well. I thought for a second and said, how big do I want to grow it? How big do you want it to be? On Sunday, the day of the marathon, we were up at 5 a.m. The race started at 6:30. We left the hotel while it was still dark. Malcolm followed the map he had printed out on his home computer and was laughing back and forth with Gary. I couldn't laugh. I was so nervous I felt like I was going to vomit. Malcolm parked in a public lot, and we walked to the staging area where the race would start. Even this far away, there were thousands of people in running gear, all headed in the same direction. Man, how many people are here? I asked in disbelief. I had no idea there would be so many runners. About 40,000, Malcolm replied. We made our way to the area where we waited for the run to start. We weren't close to the front. We would not be able to keep the pace set by the front runners, and by staying back, we would not spend the first few miles avoiding faster runners. Don't you just love the excitement here? Malcolm asked, smiling as he looked at all the people stretching, jumping, and even running in place. Whatever they could do to try and calm their nerves. I forced a smile and nodded. I wasn't sure what to do. The run hadn't even started yet, and my heart was already pounding out of my chest. I looked at all the other people and suddenly felt like an outsider. They all looked so fit, so serious. I began to think there was no way I would be able to do this run. Malcolm put his hand on my shoulder. Don't let this psych you out. You can do this. I'll be right here with you. We'll do it together. My fears disappeared. Now, instead of being afraid, I was excited, looking forward to the challenge of running 26.2 miles with Malcolm and Gary. Malcolm said, let's pray and ask God to help us with this marathon. It was a short prayer. When Malcolm prayed, he asked for strength, courage, and wisdom. He always ended with words of gratitude. Off in the distance, at the head of the pack of runners, I heard an electronic beep signal the start of the run. A small cheer went up. The runners ahead of me started to move. The entire pack opened up and I ran to keep up with the people in front of me. I must have been a little too eager. Whoa, easy, Tony. We got a long way to run. Don't worry about keeping up with them. What we want to do, for at least the first few miles, is run about an 8 or 9 minute pace. Slow down. You bet. I was so jacked up about being in this run, I yelled at Malcolm. I didn't mean to. It was just because I was so excited. I slowed down and found a spot next to Malcolm. Gary was on the other side. I matched their pace and we went down the course. There was a marker every mile. At the first mile marker, Malcolm looked at his watch. Good, right where we want to be. I looked at my watch, but in all the excitement, I had forgotten to start the timer when the run began. I decided to just focus on keeping my legs moving. By the 3rd mile marker, I felt completely comfortable. Malcolm, Gary, and I were moving along at our usual pace, except for the scenery and the 39,997 other people with us. We might as well have been on Lake Hefner on any given Saturday. At almost every intersection, the cross street was blocked so that the runners wouldn't have to worry about oncoming traffic. There was usually a police officer directing traffic. At each intersection, Malcolm got the officer's attention and said thank you. After about the 10th time, I asked Malcolm why he was doing that. I'd never known anyone to thank police officers. There are 2 reasons. First, it's polite. Most of these officers are volunteering to be here. They're taking time out of their schedule so that we can run. I want to encourage them. Second, I admire what the police do. They put their lives on the line every day for the rest of us. That is worthy of my respect. I looked at Malcolm, almost in disbelief. I had never heard anyone talk about the police in such good terms. I shook my head and thought, man, I've been living on the wrong side of the law for too long. The mile markers flew by. We stopped at a booth at mile 7 to get a drink of water and then quickly got back into our rhythm. When we passed mile marker 9, I realized that I was doing something that I had never done before. But there were plenty of things I'd done in the past 3 months that were new. I was in new territory. I must have slowed my pace slightly without even realizing it. Malcolm noticed and said, "We just passed mile marker 9. Don't let this bother you. Gary and I are with you. We'll help you finish this and cross the finish line together. Just keep moving forward." It worked. My pace increased. By mile marker 11, I lost whatever fears I'd had at mile 9. My legs felt good and Malcolm and Gary were with me. I had a long way to go, and I knew that, but I was actually starting to believe that I would make it to the end. At mile 13, Malcolm spoke up. "Halfway there. Just repeat what you've already done and we'll be finished." "Yes, sir." I tried to focus on just moving. I didn't want to stop, slow down, or think about how far I'd gone or how far I had to go. Just keep moving. But my legs started to hurt, and I began to doubt if I could really make it. "Man, I just don't know if I can do this," I told Malcolm. "You can. We'll stick together and make it." We passed mile marker 14. The course was flat and straight. Several blocks ahead in the middle of the course, we saw a lone runner having a difficult time. It was a girl, and she stood out because the other runners were passing her on both sides. She ran a few feet and then stopped. We jogged toward her and watched her almost fall. She stopped running, put her hands on her hips, and shook her head. Gary and I moved to the left side and began to pass her. I was already looking for the next mile marker. I heard Malcolm's voice over my right shoulder. "Are you okay?" he asked the girl. "Yes, I'm fine," she said sarcastically. "I just can't go on anymore. I put all this time into training for a marathon, and now I can't finish." Her voice trailed off. I stopped running and watched Malcolm talk to the stranger. I could see tears well up in her eyes. "Is this your first marathon?" Malcolm asked. "Yes." She reached up and wiped a tear from her cheek. "Come with us. We'll finish this together. What's your name?" "Heather," she answered. She seemed a little taken aback by the kindness she was being shown by a complete stranger. "I'm Malcolm. That's Tony and Gary. This is Tony's first marathon, too." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Malcolm, if we're going to finish this in under 5 hours, do you really think—" Malcolm put up his left hand and stopped me. "Tony, we have the chance to help Heather finish her first marathon. Now we can go ahead and finish on our own. Or we can help someone else finish their first marathon. Would you rather be successful, or would you rather be significant?" I knew there would be no discussion. Helping Heather was the right thing to do. I regretted saying anything to Malcolm. I had allowed my adrenaline to speak and not my brain. "All right, let's finish this bad boy," Malcolm said with a smile. Heather took a breath and started running again. We joined in with her. We went slowly at first, allowing Heather to set the pace. After about half a mile, she started running faster. We kept going, sometimes slow, sometimes fast, but always going forward. At mile 17, we ate bananas and drank water. "If we stay focused, we can still make it under 5 hours," Malcolm said as he took off. At mile 20, I could tell the run hit Heather like a ton of bricks. She was struggling just to move, much less keep pace with us. She stopped and put her hands on her knees. "My legs feel like they're on fire," Malcolm said. "Come on, Heather. Work through it." Gary added, "You can do this." "Don't stop now. We're almost done. We can finish this together, Heather," I said. "Just stick with me, and we'll both be able to say we ran a full marathon. I'm right with you." Heather walked and then jogged a few small steps. She kept that up for about a mile. I stayed with her. "Guys, my legs have finally loosened up. I'm not as fresh as when I started, but I'm through the pain," she finally told us. We kept moving towards the finish line. The mile markers passed by, 22, 23, 24. I didn't take the time to think about how far we had gone, and I barely noticed the signs. They were just one more thing on the side of the road. Mile marker 25 came and went. We followed the course around a corner and turned right. People were lining the street. Heather started to slow down. I looked down the street. Just a few blocks away, I saw a big banner overhead marking the finish line. Below it stood an electronic clock that displayed the time elapsed since the marathon began. 4 hours and 46 minutes. We still had time to make it in less than 5 hours. I was suddenly overtaken by pain. I stopped running and started walking. Heather joined me. I could tell by the look on her face that she was in pain too. "Tony, Heather, look at the finish line. Don't stop," Malcolm yelled. "Tony, keep going. We can still finish in under 5 hours, I heard Gary say. I heard everything, even people from the crowd cheering for us. The problem was that I couldn't get my legs to do what I needed. I was exhausted. There was no adrenaline left. I'd been running for almost 5 hours, and my fight was nearly gone. I looked up at the finish line again, my mind focused like it never had before. The only thought I had was for me and Heather to cross that line together. I kept going. It might have been quicker to walk, but I had been running all morning, and right now that seemed like a more natural motion. Heather must have felt me speed up. I could see her plodding along on my right side. "Heather, we're almost there. Whatever it takes, don't stop. Stay with me. We're going to finish this together." I could hear people in the crowd cheer us on. "You're almost finished. You rock. Keep your eyes on the finish line." By now, I could almost reach out and touch the finish line. Heather was by my side. Malcolm and Gary were a few steps back. They wanted me and Heather to finish together. Heather and I managed one more step. We were now almost underneath the banner. We took another step and were finally past the finish line. I looked up at the clock. 4 hours, 59 minutes, and 7 seconds. Less than a minute to spare. I bent over and put my hands on my knees. I thought about what it meant to cross the finish line. What a difference forcing myself to run the last few miles had meant. Had I stopped just a few feet short of the finish line, there would be no sense of accomplishment, no joy. But I had finished. I had just run 26.2 miles and helped Heather run her first marathon. This was an experience I would be proud of for the rest of my life. Malcolm's words went through my mind. People with self-esteem do estimable things. I thought about all the things that had happened since I had met Malcolm. I was out of jail, had a new job, was a small business owner, and had finished a marathon. It was overwhelming. Tears streamed down my face. Gary came up and patted me on the back. "Awesome. You made it in under 5 hours." Heather came up and thanked me. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said, giving me a hug. It felt great to know I helped her finish a marathon. She let go and disappeared into the arms of her family. I walked over to Malcolm. Malcolm held his hand up, and we high-fived. I told Malcolm, "Thanks for motivating me to do things I'd never even thought about."